we be like fake talking right now?
Welcome to another edition of Drugs, Crime, and Politics, brought to you by the Drug Policy Forum of Texas. Good evening. I'm your host, Buford Terrell. With me, my colleague Clayton Jones.
Good evening.
And tonight, we get to bring you some breaking news. You'll probably hear it here before you hear it on any of the mainstream media. And to tell us a little bit about it, we have Michael Blunk from the Students for Sensible Drug Policy. And Michael, what's been happening at Southwestern today?
Well, first, thanks for having me. Today at Southwestern University, 7 students were arrested on some form of drug charges. We don't know if their dorms were invaded or if they were smoking on campus. We have no idea. All we do know is that we're currently in the process of organizing a rally on campus tomorrow in the midday to oppose this invasion of the students' rights and, more importantly, the trust that these students have in their community and university.
Okay. Now, Southwestern's a private university, isn't it?
Correct. They're actually the oldest liberal arts school in Texas.
I believe that's actually in Georgetown, just north of Austin.
Yeah, about 30 minutes north.
Okay. And what's been their stand on drug policy up until now?
Well, prior to this incident, they actually had a pretty liberal policy. Anytime a student would get caught, they would kind of deal with them, get them the help they need, but not really bring in the police at all. But apparently what happened is at the end of last semester, they had a survey that asked about the students' drug and alcohol use. And all the students assumed it was just a psychological survey by a grad student or something.
Yeah. And
showed that they had marijuana and coke usage higher than any other Texas school.
Okay.
And so all of a sudden the school called in police, and this is the first time that we know of ever done this.
Okay.
So it's a complete shift from the original policy that Southwestern had.
Okay. Now, what's your website? I believe you have one, don't you?
Yes, our website is sensiblehouston.org because we'd like to push drug policies that are more sensibly based, because we think that drug abuse can cause real harms, but what we're doing doesn't make sense.
Well, I assume that as we learn more about this situation, that's one place where we can find out something about it.
Most definitely.
Okay.
So, Michael, do you think that people are going to stop being as truthful on questionnaires? If they're going to be used against them, it's going to be kind of hard for people to fill them out, honestly.
Well, that's actually something we're afraid of. The initial reaction we're hearing from a lot of students is that they don't want to help their fellow students with these surveys. I mean, because any student who's a psychology major has to do some sort of project where they survey the students and have all sorts of questions. And now we're worrying if they're going to have trouble graduating because students are afraid to answer them.
Well, as far back as the late 1930s, when Alfred Kinsey first started doing his sex studies, the problem of ensuring confidentiality on questionnaires and ensuring privacy of subjects has been a real problem for anyone doing research in criminal activity or socially frowned upon activity. And I know one of the concerns for the past 40 years has been to what extent the Monitoring the Future project at University of Michigan really understates drug use because people are reluctant to answer truthfully on surveys. So.
Yeah. Well, that's what's going to happen is if you can't be honest about these things or to prevent yourself from being in trouble.
Well, I think one thing, and remember, we're talking without any direct knowledge, any of us, on this. So.
Yeah, the university has not released any information to us at all. All we have is the dean's email to the students saying that they are trying to combat drug usage on their campus because it's harmful to students' education. But other than that, we're going off of what we've heard.
But as I understand it, there, at this point at least, no allegation that these individual students were identified through the questionnaire. It's just that the questionnaire showed high levels of usage, and this put the administration in an active mode so that it's quite possible individual privacy was not breached in this case. So we will be looking forward to what else we can see on it. One thing I'll be curious to see is to what extent the mainstream news sources pick up on this in the next few days.
Well, what we do know is we've contacted all the major outlets in Austin already to
Yes.
get them to come, and at least 2 of them have contacted Amy Wolfenberger, who's leading the effort up in Southwestern. So we're actually optimistic that we're going to get a decent amount of coverage for this issue, because this is not something that you would hear about at Southwestern before.
Well, does SSDS DP have a chapter at Southwestern?
Not right now, but
But we will next week,
I
right?
think we're going to have one soon.
We have a caller. Hello, caller. You're on the air.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Go ahead.
I have a question for you.
Okay.
Yes, sir. How is it that for you to get a job at McDonald's, you'd have to take a drug test? And here it is, man.
Yes, go
The
ahead.
leaders of this country, man, do not have to drug test. They don't take random drug tests.
Okay. That's a good question. And the reason why you have to take a drug test at McDonald's, but not to be on the police force or be elected president, first, it's because McDonald's workers are not unionized and don't have any kind of protections. And the state of Texas, more than most states, pretty much allows an employer to do anything he wants to do.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the other side to that picture is dating back at least to the days of the Reagan administration. The federal government forces insurance companies to give discounts on workers' compensation insurance to companies that do drug testing in the workplace. And it turns out that those policy discounts are larger than the cost of the tests. Now, I know of no study that's been done anywhere that shows any increase in safety, any decrease in accidents, any increase in productivity in employment situations where drug tests are used. In fact, in high-tech industries where they have tested, productivity goes down when drug tests are introduced into the workplace. But the secret is the federal government changed the insurance laws so that it's cheaper for employers to drug test than it is for them not to do so.
Right.
I would also add that it's not McDonald's workers who are making the laws on who's getting drug tests. Very
That's
few
right.
people would pass a law to get themselves subjected to a drug test.
Well, you know,
No, but if they had a union, collective bargaining could certainly ban that as a work condition.
They could try.
But you know, here's somebody making $7, $8 an hour, drug testing. I mean, how much of a hamburger can they screw up? But yet we have policemen that they drug test when they get to become a police officer. They never have to do it again.
Because their union contract forbids it.
Yes. But it's just not a fair way of things to be done.
No, and can you tell me anything about the drug laws that are fair?
Well, if
Hold on a minute.
Any of you out there, if you can think of anything about the drug laws that are fair, call and tell us about it.
well, you know, probably the one thing I can say about the drug war, and it's in favor of it, and this is I learned this over at Rice University a few weeks back, is there was a DE agent there, and his name was Mr. Hall. And I said to him, Dean's favorite question, what can you say, the one positive thing on drug prevention from all this money that we spend? And he says, well, we probably have only 5 million cocaine addicts instead of 6 million.
And he's exaggerating both of those numbers. I think, though, we need to drop back and look at a little local news before we let it slip. What happened this week in New Jersey, Clayton?
Governor Corzine, thank you very much. You are our 14th official state that has medical marijuana.
Okay, and on that I want to say that to me the amazing thing about the New Jersey vote was that it wasn't a hair's breadth victory in either house of the legislature. It passed by a wide margin in both houses, and not only Corzine, but the other candidate for the new incoming governor, both had promised to sign the bill.
Mm-hmm. The only thing about that bill is very narrow in who they accept to have a card.
Well, yes and no, because it starts out narrow, but it gives the state health board the authority to approve new conditions as they come along.
I remember the polling they did in New Jersey around the bill actually said that most residents in New Jersey were upset that it was such a restrictive bill compared to what it could have been.
We have another caller. Hello, caller. You're on the air.
Hey, how you doing tonight?
Just fine. How are you?
Great. I know we asked a lot of questions about marijuana, but how surprised are we to see that cocaine was found at NASA this week or in the last
Okay. That's a good question. How surprised were we to find cocaine at NASA?
Not very.
My answer, not very. Now, one thing, it was not found, this is important to note, it was not found in the possession of or around any of the astronauts or actually any of the professional people. It was found in a workspace, and workers at NASA, like everyone else, work under time pressure. They work overtime shifts. So I'm not surprised it was found. I suspect you could go almost into any high-pressure workplace in the country and find some. That does, however, bring up an interesting thing I've been looking at a little bit lately. Mm-hmm. And that's the growth of so-called brain booster drugs.
Yeah.
And cocaine would fit right in there. Ritalin and Adderall are the most common ones used. But one recent survey indicated that at least 25% of all college students use brain boosters to help them through school at least some of the time. A recent survey of, quote, working scientists, over 1,400 of them, over 20% of them admitted that they used brain booster drugs to help them with their work. So if some people at NASA are using cocaine as a brain booster, it doesn't surprise me. If we go back to 1935, when they were just introducing amphetamine and sending it to hospitals to be tested, the first use that they discovered for amphetamine was that nurses and doctors found out that it helped them get through long, grueling shifts of overtime work. And the Air Force and Army still use it for that. Anyway, as we were saying about the New Jersey bill, one thing, the bill itself, by its terms, limits it to New Jersey residents.
Right.
But the state of New Jersey is within easy commuting distance of New York City, Philadelphia, and the District of Columbia. It's not that hard to establish a residence even if you live somewhere else. So.
Yes, but D.C. is going medical.
Yeah.
Virginia has a large movement going on over there
and
right
also
now.
for decriminalization as well.
New York almost passed their bill. They only failed by one vote in their Senate, right?
Yeah. But as I say, with Trenton, one stop on the train away from New York City, it's going to be kind of hard to enforce that residence-only restriction. So, and while we're on that, well, first we've got to take a break, and then we'll come back.
I think the Bible is pretty clear that it expects justice and mercy and compassion. And I believe that to start with, and from my work as a criminologist, that our drug policy falls quite short on the issue of justice. That people are unequally treated depending on their ethnicity, their social class. And the Bible contains more than 2,000 scriptures decrying the injustice related to poverty, to oppression, to corrupt government.
Hi, I'm Ethan Nadelman, the founder and executive director of the Drug Policy Alliance. You're watching Drugs, Crimes, and Politics. Hope you enjoy it.
We're back with Michael Blunk of the Students for Sensible Drug Policy and Clayton Jones. We were talking about the new New Jersey medical marijuana law. I want to add that both Wisconsin and Illinois have medical marijuana bills that have passed one of the two houses in their legislatures, and the legislatures are in session. But possibly more interesting within this last week, Washington Post, ABC News conducted a new poll that showed nationwide 81% of the population is now in favor of medical marijuana.
It's quite the majority.
Yeah. That's a big majority.
And over 50% are in favor of outright legalization.
Yeah.
And
that within just a couple of years. It was down only about 40% on legalization just a couple of years ago. And it's been a majority on medical marijuana, but this once again is a substantial jump of several percentage points.
Oh, I think it's just totally out of control as far as the government is controlled. The war is lost.
Yeah.
I just wish they would actually do polling on that state by state, because I'm curious how Texan voters think about medical marijuana.
The problem is polling is expensive.
Yeah.
And unless you've got a local organization of some kind that's interested in the answer and willing to pay for it, you don't get polls. How much money does SSDP have?
Not that much.
Well, neither does DPFT.
Well,
so
Noelle did a survey a few years back.
Yeah, when she was advocating so strongly for medical marijuana. That'd be about 4 years ago now.
Right, it was like 76%? 75%.
Yeah, I knew it was
in favor of Texans, in favor of medical marijuana.
Yeah.
Okay.
We just had a poll.
Yeah.
And if anything, it's gone up from that 75.
The real problem, though, is where are that 75% located? Texas, like all states, has very, very unbalanced political districting. Most of the vote in this state, as far as the legislature is concerned, is still located in rural conservative districts, whereas most of the population now is urban. And that sways what the legislature does into a highly conservative, I'll even say reactionary fashion. But what's SSDP doing these days, Michael?
Well, we're actually doing a lot. Our national organization has been growing a lot over the past couple of years. Currently, we have 130 recognized chapters across the country. By the end of 2010, we expect to have double that, around 260.
Wow.
Part of that is due to us actually successfully changing a federal law the last session. Once the Democrats took control with President Obama getting elected, they pushed a new student loan bill. And in the bill, they changed the way that we were handling the federal financial aid elimination penalty. And so we actually successfully changed it so that you have to have a felony drug conviction to lose federal financial aid. And that actually involved us putting in over 30,000 calls to Congress in 24 hours. So the author of the amendment that would have made it covering minor amounts pulled the amendment.
Kind of locked up their phone lines?
A little bit.
Now, just to provide a little background, it was in the middle 90s that the Pell Grant statute was amended so that any college student who was convicted of any drug offense whatsoever would be ineligible for a direct government grant for student aid. Now, of course, no other criminal conviction disqualified students, so marijuana smokers couldn't go to college. Murderers who had served a prison term could.
Rapists.
And let me sidetrack you here because I think it's important to point out that already in this session of Congress, they removed the law that had blocked the District of Columbia from counting the referendum votes on medical marijuana.
Yeah.
They removed the federal funding on borrowed federal funding on needle exchange programs. The House has approved a statute that would call a new national commission to look at the drug laws with this removal of the restriction on student grants. So it's been pretty productive on the national level. But what else have you been doing?
Well, the local chapter, I'm a part of the University of Houston chapter. We are still pushing to get a Good Samaritan policy on our campus, which would shield students from harsh university punishments when they call for medical help during a drug or alcohol overdose situation for one of their fellow classmates. We successfully got one passed through the student government, but then it got vetoed by the president of student government. But we're actually very confident that we can do it this time around. We have a more favorable Senate, and we're going to be...
Are you hearing anything about how the administration would react to such a thing?
Nothing so far. We've just started our initial talks with the administration again to get them on board, but the main thing is that we've got the students behind us. We've been surveying students pretty heavily, and we're going to be doing a lot more in the coming weeks. And almost no one is opposed to the idea of a policy like this. I mean,
well, why would anybody want to even chance of somebody laying there any longer than they have to overdose? Because they're afraid.
The old attitude, the old saying, you've made your bed, now lie in it. The attitude is, if you commit a crime, you pay the price. If you commit a sin, you go to hell, and we might have to speed you on the way to get there. This idea of retribution and strict black and white rigid morality is deeply ingrained in a lot of people in this country.
One of the main arguments that we heard last time when we tried to pass the bill was actually they were afraid that this bill would somehow encourage people to use drugs and alcohol on our campus. That by somehow guaranteeing them protection if they were at risk of losing their life, they'd be like, oh, okay, let's go ahead and drink too much. I don't really think anyone, when they choose to consume alcohol or drugs illegally, are thinking about the fact, oh, well, maybe if I get really sick, I can call for help.
I think that's
a bizarre argument.
Point out, too, that on a college campus situation, that Good Samaritan law is most likely going to come into play with an acute alcohol toxicity than it is with a heroin overdose.
Oh, most definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, we have the University of Houston doesn't have so much of a problem as other larger campuses do that have a large resident population.
Right.
But fraternities and sororities, I mean, you hear situations about this all the time, that a pledge is forced to drink a whole bottle of Everclear or too much alcohol or something, and they die from it. The Texas Alcoholic Beverage Commission actually passed a Good Samaritan policy about 2 months ago because a UT student, or well, not a UT student, an Austin area student went to California Tech and was forced to drink a bottle of Everclear, and he died when he was pledging for his fraternity. Yeah. And 1 year later, which would have been this summer, TABC passed a law saying that we shouldn't be prosecuting these kids.
Yeah,
so we're hoping that this will spur other law enforcement groups to support a Good Samaritan law. Because ideally we'd have a statewide 911 Good Samaritan law like New Mexico does.
Yeah, we might also point out that in Switzerland, in the more than 10 years since they have been providing heroin to addicts, they have not had a single opiate overdose death.
Yeah.
So,
well, Portugal.
Yeah.
They have less heroin addicts now than they did 10 years ago when they legalized it.
Yeah.
Decriminalized.
Decriminalized personal use.
As does Brazil, because Brazil also decriminalized all their drugs in, was it 2007? Or was it earlier than that?
Yeah, but
they didn't tell anyone when they did it. And then magically, the policy worked just as well as Portugal's did.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's a consistent trend we're seeing is that every country that loosens their drug laws tend to see a reduction in usage, and especially in abuse and addiction rates.
Yeah.
Well, you know, it seems to me that a drug addict is only a problem when they're stealing, hurting somebody to supply their drugs, killing somebody, costing us money to be in prison.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
which are prohibition problems.
I'm going to step in here and accuse you of doing the same wrong thing that most of the drug warriors do. There is no such thing as a drug addict.
Okay.
There are opioid addicts. There are alcohol addicts.
Okay, I see.
There possibly, depending on who you ask, may be cocaine or amphetamine addicts. But each of those presents its own separate set of problems. Now, do alcohol addicts kill themselves? Yeah.
Yes.
Tobacco addicts definitely kill themselves, although in both cases it'll probably take 20 or 30 years. But opioid addicts, including heroin addicts, if they have a regulated legal supply, can continue to live a complete, perfect, normal life, holding down a productive job, supporting a family, carrying on a normal social and family relationship. They only run 2 health risks: withdrawal if the drugs are cut off, and serious constipation with long-term opiate. Now, cocaine and amphetamine overdoses are a slightly different problem. As I say, I have my doubts about whether you should really call heavy continuing use of those addiction or not, because they're not really in the same sense that alcohol or opiates are.
Well, my general view on addiction is that it's only an addiction if it's negatively impacting your life. And I'm not encouraging anyone to use drugs, opioids, or anything, but if you look at the antidepressants that we put so many Americans on nowadays, I mean, they daily have to take something that's altering the chemical levels in their brain. And an SSRI is functioning much the same way as a lot of illegal drugs are.
And if you'll notice, if you've ever taken any of them, and believe me, I have, your doctor warns you that you don't stop them suddenly.
Yeah.
That you have to taper off because they also have severe withdrawal symptoms, and some of the benzodiazepams like Valium and Xanax, for instance, people that have heavy dependencies on them, abrupt stopping can actually lead to convulsions and death.
Yeah.
So
that's one of the
that's
scarier
much
things.
more dangerous than the stimulants or opioids either. So
my brother died from alcohol withdrawal at 37 years old.
Yeah, alcohol withdrawal has long been known to run the risk of death.
Yeah, because I mean,
most responsible alcohol rehab programs use an inpatient withdrawal where the patient is kept on strong medication for the entire withdrawal period to prevent that from happening. So, but as I say, please be careful when you talk about drug addicts, because it's a case where one word doesn't fit all.
No, it doesn't.
Well, you're with the University of Houston chapter.
Yes.
There are a lot of universities and colleges, professional schools here in the city. Are there any others that have chapters, or do they associate with your chapter?
We're working on that.
Okay.
We have a chapter at the San Jacinto Community College, their central campus. We have students I guess we have to go to a commercial break real fast.
Yeah, and when we come back from this break, we may go to something a little more lighthearted for a while. So we'll see you in a few minutes.
The jury right to say not guilty is an essential safeguard against injustice, which dates back to English common law and the founding of the United States. Jurors in early 19th century America routinely refused to enforce the Alien and Sedition Act, and they rejected the Fugitive Slave Act. Jurors in early 20th century America refused to enforce alcohol prohibition. The injustices of the war on drugs have become obvious to many Americans. In cases where the law, prosecutorial excesses, and the likely sentence seem manifestly unfair, jury nullification ensures the citizen juror a more equal status with those who write the laws. Please visit the Fully Informed Jury Association, FIJA.org. Please keep such decisions private. Nullification is your right, your responsibility, perfectly legal and just.
Hi, this is Willie Nelson from NORML. For 30 years, NORML has provided a voice for the millions of Americans who smoke marijuana responsibly. More than 500,000 Americans are arrested each year for smoking pot. These are ordinary citizens like you and me, whose lives and careers are being needlessly destroyed. To learn how you can help, contact NORML at www.norml.org or call toll-free at 888-67-NORML.
We're at war. At war against the planet. A war that can never be won. Marijuana can kill you. If you smoke 15 tons in 15 minutes, the equivalent of eating 10 raw potatoes.
Hey, this is Tommy Chong, and you're watching Drugs, Crime, and Politics.
Tommy Chong looks just like Moonbaker.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're back. I'm with Clayton Jones and Michael Blunk, and our old friend Tom Loud has joined us.
Howdy, folks. How you doing?
And it looks like you brought show and tell with you tonight, Tom.
It's show and tell time. That's right.
More from the folks in the hemp world.
That's right.
What do you got for us?
Okay, everybody knows that hemp is a useful product. Both Clayton and I are wearing hemp shirts. I love your hemp wine shirt, by the way. That's beautiful. This is just a T-shirt with a design that, I know, isn't that wonderful? But did you know that hemp is probably the most nutritious thing on the whole dang planet? Just flat out. Let's just say, I can't think of anything more nutritious.
Being an old-time, multi-generation West Texan, does that mean more nutritious than a great big juicy beefsteak?
I hate to tell you. It's got just as much fat, but it's got much better fat. And it's 50%, the seed itself is 50% protein. And it's quite tasty, and we're going to find out here. This is a product available on the market. It's called Tempt, and you can look at this at your high-end grocery stores.
It's like a Whole Foods would have that?
Yep, if you still shop at Whole Foods. And I know, we're stuck, and we're going to go after this little bugger, because, do you have any fingernails? Can you pick that little tab here?
That's the problem with modern packaging. When they start chai-proofing them,
admit it, Buford, we're still looking for a glass jar with a puck on top of it.
Hey, I carry a bottle opener on my keychain for a reason.
There you go.
Glass bottles are better.
We are professionals. So we're going to try a little of this.
So we're having a good old-fashioned taste test here.
We're having a little taste test here.
See, we should have done a blind.
And you should try this at home.
Blind.
I'm the moderator and have to be neutral, so I'm going to set out the taste test.
And we're going to say, again, I use this in my coffee. I use this in my cappuccino, and it steams up very nice, just like soy milk. Thank you very much. What do you think, guys?
Salute.
Salute.
Cheers. Well, what's the verdict of the judges?
It's not bad at all. It's good.
Yeah, it's really good.
There you go. Try that on your granola in the morning. So this is just the tip of it that we're finding. That
well, we did poor planning because 2 weeks ago on the show, someone brought in a box of hemp granola, and if we'd had you both here tonight,
and now we got to
had breakfast. Yeah.
Next week it's cookies. You want next time? 2 weeks from tonight, come on back and see.
What kind of cookies you going to make us?
Oh, jeez. Meanwhile,
you're supposed to get those at your dispensary in California, not here in Houston. I'm sorry.
Well, we in Houston need our dispensaries.
We do need dispensaries.
We do.
I use the whole seed in actually baking bread and regular cookies. There's actually a restaurant in town. I guess I can recommend them just in this context. Ruggles Green serves some hemp foods, and
is that the old Ruggles on Westheimer?
No, not the old Ruggles. Okay. It's a new satellite Ruggles on West Alabama, just the other side of Montrose Boulevard, or just the other side of
it's just east of Kirby, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. So
great restaurant.
At least one place where you can get
actual hemp food.
Yeah.
The hemp protein powder, which is available, I know, at Central Market, 50% protein. Show it to your doctor. Watch him just freak out at the omegas in here.
Well, I think
your essential fatty acids that they keep telling you to take. You got to get some from fish. You got to get some from grains, some from fruits, or you could get them all at once
with hemp. I know this only by rumor and reputation, since I have never darkened the door of any such place. But I understand that in some of the vitamin and supplement stores, you can get all sorts of hemp and hemp oil concoctions.
That's right.
Included salad dressings and cosmetics and shampoos. And all of these other things are available.
Well, it's very popular in cosmetics because hemp is one of the 3 natural sources of liquid paraffins. Your other 2 sources are jojoba beans, which are very expensive, and whale oil.
Yeah, which is...
Yeah, okay, we won't go...
Been somewhat out of style for the last...
Citizenship for dolphins. Oh, I'm sorry. Brothers.
Well, I noticed the Japanese kind of got themselves
We're going to get them on hemp, and they'll feel better about it. It's hemp tofu will rock.
Well, now can you wrap the hemp up in a seaweed leaf and call it hemp foo or something?
Endless possibilities, and more to come from actual whole flour made from the whole seed to make a wheat substitute. To, as I say, tofu, the protein powders. Okay, the whole next generation of processed synthetic foods. As much as we're all trying to eat whole and local, boys and girls, we know that we will be eating some mystery meat, and some of it will be textured protein from hemp. It's going to be the most nutritious thing on the planet.
I might also point out here that every bit of the hemp we're talking about has been imported from Canada, from Europe, or even from China. Because under our federal drug laws, hemp is still an illegal Schedule I dangerous drug and cannot be grown. Now, North Dakota has passed a state law authorizing the growing of hemp in that state. Oregon has one in the legislature now.
I'm surprised they haven't moved with It's like they said they won't bust a dispensary. How about a farm? You know?
Well, they've been busting farms.
They've been busting farms still. So
Yeah.
What bothers me about the prohibition of hemp is that, I mean, George Washington, Ben Franklin, they all grew hemp on their farms. The Declaration of Independence was written on hemp paper during World War II.
Up until the 1930s, our folding money was printed on hemp paper.
During World War II, we were encouraging citizens to grow hemp because parachutes prior to the invention of nylon were made out of hemp.
When we lost the Philippines, we lost our supply of hemp cordage. I'm gonna have another
and even though the federal government had outlawed it 3 years before, all of a sudden the Naval Department started promoting the Victory Through Hemp program.
Hemp for Victory.
Yep.
And they encouraged hemp farms, and wild ditchweed escaped from those farms, and I guess still grows as weed some in Missouri, and that's where Kentucky got a lot of its start in hemp.
Iowa has some too.
Well, the Kentucky strain was considered the finest in the world, and it is actually feared that that strain, hemp, industrial. Okay. Kentucky hemp was considered the finest in the world. In fact, Kentucky seed was planted in up as far as Minnesota.
Yeah.
And we fear now that that strain may be lost. I'm sorry. Did you look in your yard? Check out your driveway.
Well, unfortunately, if there's any there now, it's probably been backbred to the native to increase the THC.
It's gone feral.
Yeah. Which makes it more useful to a lot of people. But no, I remember at one time there was at least one store on Lower Westheimer that specialized in hemp clothing. Is it still there?
No, they are gone. They're the old hemp emporium, original. In fact,
You're talking about Richard's old store?
Yeah, yeah.
That was on West Alabama.
Right.
Oh, was it Alabama? Okay.
Richard and another feller who was last seen working on the Cynthia McKinney campaign a couple years back.
Okay.
And so these people are around, but man, they could do it so long. And then, I'm sorry, somebody's got to pick up the torch and carry it on. And Mike, I want to thank you for your courage. And please have a copy of my live album, Live at the Oasis, as a copy of our home game.
Oh, thank you.
Okay,
so now it's your turn. When a moment ago, how many phone calls did you get in 24 hours?
Over 30,000.
Okay, that's you.
Why aren't you calling?
And you. Over there. Did you call? Okay, we'll call tomorrow. You'll have time during the day.
If you figure there are about 550, let's call it 500, senators and representatives, 30,000, that's about 60 calls for each member of Congress. That's a pretty good...
Have a party, have a phone prank party, except you got to be nice.
We had a couple of the representatives, their staff kept telling us, stop calling us. We're getting annoyed with you. We've already gotten a dozen from you today, which is the best thing you can ever hear.
Yes.
At least you got their attention. And, you know, they used to tell a joke in my part of the world about how easy it was to reason with a mule. And one of the guys that argued about how you reason with a mule went out to show a farmer how to do it. He started out by picking up a 2x4 and slamming the mule over the head. The farmer said, I thought you were going to reason with him. And the trainer said, yeah, but you got to get his attention first. Now, mules are a little smarter than the average congressman, but the same techniques tend to work with them.
I know some people who might disagree with you on that one.
Oh, they think mules are a lot smarter than the average congressman?
No discouragement to livestock here today. Yeah, we do make change, but we make it individually. Each of us gets up and does things, and sometimes they're easy things, sometimes they're hard things. And mostly these easy things, they're real easy, and they're habit forming. Once you do it 2 or 3 times, it just, your week's not complete unless you've done it at least once.
Well, let's see who's on the phone.
You know, instead of making 5 phone calls, write 1 letter.
Write 1 good.
Well, let's
longhand and put it in snail
Hey guys,
mail.
let's see who's on the phone. Hello, you're on the phone.
Hello, Buford, this is Dean.
Well, hello,
Hey, Dean.
Hi, Dean.
How you doing, Dean?
Everybody. You guys have been talking about all kinds of things tonight. I'm just going to kind of go over the things that are on my mind. I recently sent a letter to the editor of the Dallas Morning News about a recent editorial, Drug Lords and Terrorism.
Yeah.
And they go on to talk about, capturing this recent cartel leader, El Teo Garcia Simbenthal. Yeah. Underscores their contention that we're in a counterterrorism war, which Felipe Calderon, the president of Mexico, must continue pursuing with full vigor. And Buford, and you guys know that's just absurd. Yeah. That guy's been replaced, or he will soon be replaced via some bloody battles and butchered bodies.
I'm thinking back to about 1980 when they took down Pablo Escobar in Colombia, and there went the kingpin. Everything's over. And guess what? They're all still working.
It's not a big cartel down there anymore. It's 100 cartelitos, former members of paramilitary groups and other nefarious people.
But they mostly moved to Mexico.
Like a starfish, you cut it up and throw it back in the ocean, and look what comes back. It's never going to succeed. And as a member of law enforcement against prohibition, I consider it, necessary that we just end it outright. Just pull the plug on this thing. It was a stillborn monster. The drug, menace was never what it was purported to be. And with every step we've taken, we've enhanced our terrorist enemies and given reason for these violent gangs that plague our neighborhood. It is totally absurd to continue down this path for another moment. Here it is, an email I was just looking at came in today. Heroin-assisted treatment in the United States is talking about heroin trials are already successful in Switzerland, the Netherlands, England, Spain, Germany, and Canada. Yeah. And research shows that prescription heroin leads to reduction of crime, HIV, hepatitis C, and overdose deaths. You guys have had a guest on there, Dr. Joel Hockman, head of the American Pain Doctors Association.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And when he was on my radio show, he was talking about heroin, when it's used properly under a doctor's control, is one of the safest drugs on the planet. Back in the day, and you know this, Buford, I used to sell on the grocery shelf next to Bayer aspirin at the very same price. And then, as now, aspirin is probably the bigger problem. We have fooled ourselves and robbed ourselves of so much treasury, squandered it on this prison industrial complex, thrown it down the rat hole. We've got a situation now where college tuitions are going up. They're building more prisons, less colleges, and America needs to get back on the right track, and there's only one way to do that, and that's to pull the plug on this son of a gun. I want to just send a shout-out to those who may be familiar with the Drug Truth Network programs. We're going to be focusing more and more on the history and to understand the nature of why this continues despite its obvious and glaring failure.
Okay, and where can they hear your programs, where and when?
They're currently airing my 2 half-hours back-to-back. Cultural Baggage at 6:30 p.m. and Century of Lies at 7 p.m. on Sunday evenings. You can listen at KPFT 90.1 FM. And then they now air the 420 Drug War News at 9:57 a.m.
It's 420 somewhere, Dean.
It's 420, yes. But, I consider it a privilege to work with people like you, people who understand this. And I asked my radio audience this. What are you going to tell your grandkids you did to end this stupid 100-year war on non-prescription drugs?
Okay.
Crazy.
Well, thank you, Dean.
Thanks a lot, Dean.
Keep up the good work.
You too.
Now, I want to point out one thing that Dean and I have talked about a lot, you and I have talked about a lot. The drug war is fertilized by money. Legalize the drugs, remove the money, and the cartels and gangs go away. I hear we've got to take another break.
Hello, I'm Nadia Swaby with the Marijuana Policy Project. Today's question comes to us from our YouTube subscriber, Ray Sputin. He asks about the truth behind some strange numbers the White House Office on National Drug Control Policy and others have put out lately. According to the ONDCP's Marijuana and Teens fact sheet, each year more teens enter treatment with a primary diagnosis of marijuana dependence than for all other illicit drugs combined. Sounds scary, right? Prohibitionists regularly claim that one of marijuana's main dangers is that it's addictive. But if you've seen our episode number 3, you know that's stretching the truth. The federal government's own statistics show that the majority of people in treatment for marijuana abuse or dependence did not seek treatment. They were forced into it because they were arrested. Imagine you're given 2 choices, rehab or prison. Which one would you take? In the government's eyes, all marijuana use is abuse, plain and simple. According to the treatment episode data set highlights, only 15% of those in marijuana treatment sought treatment voluntarily. Also, according to the TEDS data, over 1/3 of those in treatment for marijuana abuse or dependence did not use marijuana at all in the 1 month prior to admission, and more than half used it 3 times or less. These are addicts. Would you call someone who had 3 beers in a month an alcoholic? The truth is, we arrest people for smoking marijuana, force them into treatment that most of them don't need, then use those treatment admissions as proof that marijuana is addictive. Sounds pretty Orwellian to me. This has been Marijuana 2-Minute Truths. Don't forget to email us your questions. Bye.
We're back. Been asked to make the announcement that springtime is approaching. Yes, winter's nearly over.
Hooray.
And springtime means that we're slipping up on the 420 get-together. This year, Houston 420 will happen on 4/17.
That's Saturday.
Saturday.
And that'll be at Last Concert Cafe again. Wonderful folks.
Do we have any people showing up, groups?
We don't have a lineup yet, but Carolyn has said there are conditions that if met, she could make it. So hold your breath.
Okay. And it's one of those things where a great time is had by all if you show up there.
Okay.
And if I come again, I promise not to talk very long. And I want to recommend that you all look at Michael's website at
sensiblehouston.org.
Michael Blunk, and that's Blunk with a K. Get your mind out of the ashtray.
And I want to congratulate SSDP for the good work they've been doing. And
thank you.
Frankly, I have been amazed that college students, primarily undergraduate ones, could sustain the enthusiasm and momentum that this organization has for, well over 10 years now. And most of the time without much to show for it until just recently. There aren't many groups that can maintain that kind of momentum and that kind of enthusiasm. So
it can be tough.
Keep it up and be careful, because in about another 10 years, this guy will be old enough to go to Congress, and then look out. So
it'll be a whole new world in 10 years, I hope.
Yeah. So we've rushed through a whole lot of stuff real fast tonight. Anything else you want to bring up, Clayton?
There's a lot of great little stories out there about this Les Iverson became the new drug advisor for our government. David Nutt was fired for speaking out against President Obama's medical marijuana stand.
Actually, it was the English.
No, actually, Nutt was the English advisor to the Home Secretary.
Yeah.
And he was fired for disagreeing with the Home Secretary's decision to stiffen the penalty against marijuana.
Guess what? I got 2 stories wrote up into one.
That happens. I get wires crossed all the time.
There's so much stuff going on at once.
I wonder what I was doing while I was writing these stories.
I don't know. It could be that you're just trying to act like your hair is as gray as mine is.
So if anybody's thought about, I should have gotten involved back then, now's a perfect time to get involved into the movement, because local artist Billy Bergman has a great song. He insists he keeps writing and playing these songs so that people will know that he was involved when they finally start selling weed at Walmart.
Well, you know, my motto for a couple of months now has been that marijuana is broccoli. And I think that it ought to be right next to the broccoli in the farmer's market and at the same price.
Yeah.
We're about to let one important story slip by.
And which one's that?
And what was that the new city attorney in Seattle announced this last week?
Oh, yes. There will be no more prosecutions of possession of marijuana.
Of less than an ounce.
Less than an ounce.
Yeah.
In Seattle.
Well, you know, who carries around more than an ounce?
Someone that really worries about not getting home in time.
Okay.
No, it's about time they've done that. I'm noticing a lot that more and more police seem to be okay with actually coming out and talking about the idea that maybe we should change our drug laws.
Oh, I've talked to a lot of policemen that say the same thing.
You know, they've been saying that to me for years, but they usually say, you know, I can't say this in public, or I can't say it where I'll be overheard, but you know what I really think is...
Mm-hmm.
And I you know, the DEA guy that said they'd spent 40 years, he had kept the cocaine users from going up from 5 million to 6 million.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think
trillions of dollars.
Yeah, I think he's being more optimistic than most of them are.
If he's
what
right.
Is it? Alcohol and tobacco. We have over 500,000 people a year are killed directly because of that.
Of the two of them together.
Of the two of them together. And we don't have 17,000 deaths from illegal drugs a year.
Right. Largely due to irregular supply and bad content.
Aspirin and Tylenol kill more than the opioids do.
Oh, yes.
Almost 5,000.
Yeah.
Well, the
ballpoint pen ink. Toxic reaction to ballpoint pen ink. 15 to 16 people every year.
Are they injecting it?
Well, the thing I'd want to say to the DEA guy is, if that's the case, then how come we have the highest cocaine usage rate in the entire world at 33% of our population?
Yeah.
Well, just be glad that they're here then.
Well, all I wish is we had that $1 billion or so back to use for other things.
Oh.
But remember, we're about to run out of time. It's your government. You may not by yourself be able to get 30,000 phone calls in 24 hours to Congress.
But we can't make that 30,000
But you can get one-page letter, handwritten with a stamp on it, to your representative and tell him or her what you want. And you might also suggest to him that if he doesn't listen to you, he'll be fired come the next November.
Talk to your friends, talk to your family, write letters to your newspaper. Just spread the word. That's the easiest thing you can do.
It's the effort of sitting down, taking the time to put it in longhand. I've had every representative tell me that they look at them so much more than emails or anything else.
And one last question before we run out of time. How does that stuff taste with chocolate syrup in it?
Damn good.
Okay.
I think it would taste pretty good.
You can trust me on this.
Next show we'll try that.
Okay.
That's right. We'll be back with a little chocolate.
So we will be back to you with more experiments in the world of hemp and living and other news from the world of drugs and drug laws in about 2 weeks. And let's hope we have as much positive news as we did this week. Good night, and we'll see you.
We have these private prisons that have now hired lobbyists to go get minimum mandatories and
I began to understand that the 17 or the 19-year-old kid I had in the backseat of my police car was not a criminal at all.
Remove the profit motive. If you remove the profit motive, you can do away with almost all these problems. And how do you that simple, damn prohibition, which can only mean one thing: legalize drugs. Legalize all drugs.